Welcome to the IDP Hunter Podcast. Tonight we're going to discuss the NFC North, and we're going to go a little in depth. We're going to talk about our pre-draft predictions, our pre-draft rankings. I'm going to actually read off an article I wrote. As you guys know, I'm a ranker over at Fantasy Pros. I'm also an article writer over at the Fantasy Six Pack, as well as IDP Plus. The article I wrote over at IDP Plus was an in-depth discussion about IDP players in the NFC North. But I wanted to give my audience a little bit of more than that. I wanted to talk about offense and defense. So joining me tonight is Kyle Sendra. Kyle is a podcast host over at the Full Press. He also does the Going for Two Live, and he does articles for both sites. He's also a Fantasy Pros ranker. How you doing, Kyle?
Hey, Steve. I'm doing fantastic. Ready to hunt through some fantasy advice here.
Heck yeah. We have a history, too, don't we? We've played in a couple leagues before, have we not?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, fantasy football is the reason that we're all here making all these podcasts, this content. So, yeah, it's the game itself that connects us and has literally connected us.
It's so neat getting together and seeing us face to face. But yeah, we've played in some guillotine leagues before. We played in Jeff's vampire league. Some crazy stuff going on.
Jeff's invention, the zombie league, which
oh my goodness,
is its own unique format that takes from a bit of those type of aspects, guillotine and vampire. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I wanted to introduce you to my audience. Like I said, we're over here on YouTube channel. IDP Hunting Grounds, also on the Fantasy Six Pack, and we're also on Spotify as well as Apple. But, you know, what my audience may not know about you that I found interesting was, you know, as a Fantasy Pros ranker, you were the number one guy week 17. I don't know if you know that, but you hit number one at the most important time, championship week, sir.
Yeah, week 17, 2022, which I guess technically would have been like January 2023. But yeah, who knew? There we go. It worked out there at least. Hopefully enough people. I helped enough people win championships.
Now I understand
people win championships. Their opponents played well.
Yeah, I understand you're a Canadian, but you're a Packers fan. Is that true?
That is correct. Yes.
How does that happen?
So, I mean, to be fair, and I've looked at Canadian merchandise for the NFL, and the Packers are typically among the highest every year. So does seem like it's one of those true international fan bases. And you know what? Hey, look at that. We're going to Brazil for the first time. Let's send the Packers. It just seems like it's one of those teams that they kind of can market it across the whole world as this, in the NHL hockey, we talk about the original six franchise and what those mean. I guess the Packers would technically be one of the six first franchises that were in the second year of the NFL's existence. But for me personally, it all comes from family. And my grandfather was a Packers fan. And
okay.
Part of my family is Bills fans as well, because the proximity to a lot of them are Leafs fans, and even if they don't all live in Toronto, a lot of them live here in Sudbury. The proximity of Buffalo being so close, to me, it is the closest American city for me to get to.
And this division is actually an interesting one, and it's just so cool having you on. This is one of your favorite teams in here that we'll discuss. But the Packers won 12 NFC North titles. The Vikings won 5 and the Bears won 4. Here's an interesting stat for you, Kyle. I don't know if you know this, but do you know that this is the first year that the actual NFC crown went to the Detroit Lions? Did you know that?
Oh, so I'm a Packers fan who's very petty. And even though this happened 31 years before I was born, the Packers' perfect season in 1962 was ruined because they lost one game to the Lions that year. And so because of that, they're my least favorite NFL team. So I despise them. And especially when everyone was correctly, to their credit, saying that they'd win the division, my whole pushback was they hadn't won division in so long. It wasn't even the NFC North. The Buccaneers have won this division more recently, back when it was the NFC Central. So yeah.
And that's a good point, because when I pulled that stat out, I'm like, that can't be true. That can't be true. And I looked, I'm like, oh yeah, this division was reformed in 2023. So it's not going that far back, but they got one last year. The most modern.
It was the Texans were the last team to join, right? And then when they joined, and it was exactly 32, they went to the 4-and-4 system, because I think before that each conference had 3 divisions only. So you had more than 4 teams, and I think that's
they had 5 in there. Yeah, and I think there was one. NC West had 4, but yeah, that's how it used to be. I guess we can kick off the first one. You want to do the Bears first?
I mean, for a lot of reasons, it makes sense. They finished last in the division this previous year, which maybe isn't a whole surprise. They have tended to do that recently. They have the first overall pick in the NFL draft, and if we're going alphabetically, they would be alphabetical regardless if you went by city name or team name. So if all signs point to Chicago first. Everyone loves the Bears.
And you weren't kidding. Not only were they last, but statistically they were bad. Total offense, 323.2 average. That was ranked 20th in the NFL. Rushing, 141.1. They were ranked second in rushing, so that's okay. Passing, 182.1, ranked 27th. Now here's where it kind of gets interesting. For total defense, they were 12th with 324.2. Defensive rushing, they were 86.4. They're actually ranked first. Pass defense, they were 237.8. They're ranked 25th. That's kind of a misleading stat too, Kyle, because the way I look at that is, okay, it's easier to pass on these guys. Let me dunk on them by throwing the ball down the field rather than run on them. But nonetheless, they were the number one rushing defense. So any thoughts? Like, how do you think they're gonna draft this year? You got any thoughts on that?
Well, they've got the first overall pick. So, and right now, Tyson Badgett would be the starting quarterback. All signs point to them not only taking a quarterback. It seems obvious at this point, at least to a lot of people, that it's Caleb Williams. I guess there's still room that they maybe like another quarterback more, but for now, it seems like Caleb Williams is the guy, and this team is going to be just built around him from now. So,
the three team needs that I thought were quarterback, center, and defensive line. To your point, they need not only they need a quarterback, they need a locker room presence. But the center position looks kind of jacked up. They've been playing a lot of musical chairs with guys like Lucas Patrick, Defini in there. They need a starter. Ryan Bates is another guy. Needs depth. They need somebody penciled in, I guess. And then, of course, defensive line. They had guys like Njoku in there. Montez Sweat ended up leading two different franchises in sacks. So I think quarterback, center, defensive line is a good team needs there. Anybody else? Do you see anything else differently than I do?
I would say, not just center, you might be able to upgrade several spots along that offensive line. And as good as Braxton Jones has been as what was he? I think he was a 5th round pick a couple of years ago, and he's basically started 2 full seasons at left tackle. And he hasn't been a liability, but he also hasn't thrived. And now I wonder, with their natural first round pick, the 9th overall pick that the Bears have, I know a lot of people are pointing to wide receiver, but you did mention them as one of the top 3 needs. I wonder if they get maybe the best or second best tackle and they really upgrade at that spot. And then Braxton Jones, he's probably be an above average to very good swing tackle as a backup player that could be highly coveted.
For our audience at home that can't see our screen right now, or those that are on YouTube, or those that are watching us from Spotify, I literally pulled up a depth projection on PFF, and we're kind of looking at it together. And you're right, Jones looks like the projected left tackle. PFF has him graded at 68.8.
So I think that would be maybe about league average at best. Which again, 5th round pick who's started every game since he's been a rookie. I think just the amount of starts you've gotten out of him has probably made that pick worth it already. So it also doesn't feel like we're giving up on him by taking another tackle. I mean, he could still be 2 years on a rookie contract again, and injuries do tend to happen. Maybe if they do take a rookie 9th overall, if they're not ready. So I know a lot of people point to they'll go wide receiver there. I think it'll be better for Caleb Williams' development if they actually go with the franchise left tackle.
So question for you, I guess that's where we can start if you want. If you want to do quarterback, offensive line, tight end in there, what do you see going on? Is there anybody fantasy relevant to you? Anything interesting to you?
Well, I think Caleb will have a certain amount of fantasy relevance, again, assuming it's him. But whoever the Bears take, they're expected to start week 1 and getting to throw to DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and a pair of tight ends potentially could also be really interesting. If you look at the Bears depth chart behind Keenan Allen, DJ Moore, and in my eyes, Dante Pettis looks like the best one. I know they did take a rookie last year, Tyler Scott. So that's maybe 4 guys you're okay with on your roster. They certainly look like they're going to add bodies there. So I feel at some point they will take receiver. Maybe they do at 9 overall. I'm not wrong there. But if you could add especially a great left tackle that can help protect Caleb Williams and keep him on the field, I think he's got enough weapons around him that he could thrive as a rookie. I don't know if we expect a CJ Stroud season from him, but
Yeah.
something maybe better than say like a Trevor Lawrence, who it seems that Caleb is like viewed as the best prospect that's come out since at least Trevor Lawrence. Some people say they go back even further to say Andrew Luck. I've heard a lot of. So, the way Lawrence had almost a historically bad rookie season, maybe not so different than the guy that went first overall last year with Bryce Young. So I think we've seen first overall picks have bad seasons. I just gave a couple of really prominent examples there. But I think if I were to realistically expect Caleb Williams, I say he'd do better than that. But maybe the happy medium between Lawrence and Stroud's rookie seasons.
Yeah, historically in the NFL, if you go back like historically seasons ago, it's usually the number one QB in the draft class is the hit, like the Peyton Manning, and then the number two is the bust. But look what we got last year. We got Young over Stroud. So maybe that's a misnomer. Maybe that's an anomaly. I don't know. It's so hard. It's like a bag of Cracker Jacks. You don't know what's going to be in there when you're getting a quarterback. If you were a Bears fan, would you feel comfortable with Caleb Williams?
I think so. Because if I'm a Bears fan, the quarterback isn't even the worry. It's can the organization develop the quarterbacks? It seemed Justin Fields came out as a great prospect, and this organization, which includes this general manager and head coach, not for his entire tenure at quarterback, but for some seasons there, it seems like they failed to help him take the next step. Kind of seems like he started to turn the corner last year after he came back from his injury. That's when I think we've seen maybe the best football of his career. Not the rushing yards that he had the previous season, but I wonder about this offense, the way that the moves they've made. I mean, trading for Keenan Allen, but letting Darnell Mooney walk, and I think Allen's an upgrade there, but you also haven't added more to this room in terms of the depth. So, Dante Pettis or Tyler Scott is your third receiver. I wonder if, even though it seems like it's the new trend in the NFL, like the base personnel for a lot of teams is 11 personnel, 3 wide receivers on the field. I wonder if they're one of the rare teams that might not be their base personnel. They might prefer the 2 tight end formation. That'll also still allow them to be run heavy. So, because I think part of you were talking about how highly ranked they were both in run defense, but also in run offense. I wonder how much that was directly impacted by Justin Fields. I mean, he had I think about 140 carries last year. So that certainly adds to it. I don't know that you get the same type of rush yardage. Williams.
One thing I will give this organization credit is the general manager. He likes to move up and down. He's a wheeler and dealer in drafts. So we don't know actually if it's going to be 11 personnel or we don't know what's going to be. It could be anything.
Sure.
The team finished 7-10, but they went on a 4-2 win streak at the end of the season. So, I mean, there are exciting pieces to come. So we really don't know,
And, I mean, back to the defensive stats you were talking about, I mean, it seemed like a lot of the bad from the passing defense happened earlier in the season before Alan Williams and his resignation. It seems like the defense did get better when Eberflus kind of directly took it over. Now, I think they hired a DC, so it seems like he's not going to repeat that in terms of him having so much authority. He'll hands off and be the head coach if he can get the DC hired correctly. We'll find out in time.
So on that note, what Kyle's alluding to, let me just go and talk about the defensive line real quick here. You're absolutely correct. The stats I'd like the audience to know. First 8 games of the season, week 1 through week 8, the Bears' pressure rate was 27.9%. Just to give you a comparison, that ranked 31st in the NFL, almost dead last. Pass rush was non-existent. Weeks 9 through 18, they picked it up 34.3%. That ranked 24th in the NFL. What was the difference? Montez Sweat. Montez Sweat came over as an ascending IDP player, right? He got traded from the Commanders. He had 6.5 he led the Bears with. He had he ended up finishing the season with 12.5. So he had 6.5 on one team, 6 on the other. Pro Bowl selection. He's probably the only guy in history, if I'm not mistaken. I know I pulled this earlier this year. He's the only player that I know of that actually led 2 franchises with sack record. So that's
I saw that tweeted out by the NFL officially last year when at the end of the season. So yeah, that's which also speaks to the lack of depth on both those teams. That 6 sacks was enough to lead the team.
Thank you. There it is. So Sweat is your guy on that side. Now a lot of people will kind of maybe debate this, but I don't think the tackles are not that bad. It's truly one of those spots. Hey, they got early picks in the draft. Maybe they can get a quarterback. Maybe they come back around and get an edge. That'd be interesting. But right now, penciling in next to Sweat would be Andrew Billings. Andrew Billings is a really good quality run stopper. I like him. And the other guy is Dexter Gervin Sr. A lot of people don't know about him, but he's a second rounder. He's got pedigree. He's a tackler. The fourth guy on this line, his name is DeMarcus Walker. He's a journeyman. He's interesting to me in deep leagues because he's a hybrid, but he works best as a backup. Another point, too, I want to make just to round this out, Justin Jones, he signed over from the Cardinals. So, he may be involved in this, but I'm expecting one of those rookie picks to be on them early. What says you?
Yeah, again, I know a lot of people want to point to receiver, but it really does feel like if they stick at 9 overall, and to your point earlier, they might move around too. But 9th overall, again, it might be the second best tackle, might even be the best tackle.
There you
might
go.
Also be the edge rusher too, with so many offensive players seemingly expected to go in the top 10. You might even have your choice at both there. So yeah, I think it might be just as likely that they go. In fact, it might even be more likely, to your point of, like Braxton Jones, he can do the job, so you don't feel like you have to replace him. If you can upgrade, if you truly think there's a generational tackle, it could make sense to go there. But if there's also the best edge player in the draft available to you, that might also be worth it too. So
it's a guessing game. We just don't know. And like I said, we're speculating this time, but those are my 4 penciled in starters. Kyle, what do you see over on the offense?
Well, yeah. So I guess back to the thought of, do they run 2 tight end sets? Because the strange move that they make was bringing in Gerald Everett. I thought that was kind of unexpected for them to be the spot there. I think Cole Kmet's still the starter, but it does feel like this kind of saps both their fantasy value. I wouldn't really want to invest in either, even though it feels like whoever between them is the number 1 tight end and leading tight end will probably be 3rd on the team in targets. I feel like, Swift has that skill set, but to a certain extent, so does Roschon Johnson. So the running backs might divide there in terms of how many targets are given to one specific player, unless they really do key it over to Swift being the main back. And I guess to a point I made earlier, how do they maintain running without Justin Fields? Maybe it's Swift is that answer. That's why we went and got DeAndre. So if we really want to upgrade at this running back position, I guess the 2 tight end sets, does that help that as well? So I guess Swift, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, those all seem like good viable fantasy options. I guess the real thing is who does lead the team in targets? Will it be DJ Moore? Will it be Keenan Allen? Because they've both basically gone their entire career leading their team in targets almost every season of each of their careers respectively. And Mike Williams, very talented. Curtis Samuel, very talented as well, but I don't think they've had another version of themselves on the same team that'll eat the same amount of targets. I suppose both could just get most of the targets on this team in reality. And the fact that Keenan Allen's come in, the Chargers have kind of shocked Cole Kmet and almost taken his value out of him, because last year he was number 2 on the team in targets. It doesn't feel like that's going to be the case this year. There really will be more in Keenan Allen, but it's who between them is the better guy. I think I have my answer, but I could be swayed either way, because this is it's pretty tricky, especially with a new quarterback, a rookie quarterback. For him, these are all new teammates, so there is no loyalty to Moore just because he was there last year.
It's so fun trying to speculate, though, but that's a good analysis. That's a good take. I'm going to move it to linebacker real quick. Talked about some of these players here. The guy that everybody needs to know is TJ Edwards. Okay. People that slept on IDP circles, if they don't know who TJ Edwards is, that simply amazes me. He ended up being the league's top tackler with 155 tackles. I'm getting him in drafts right now, Kyle, 7th, 8th, 9th, where he should be going top 4, easy. This is a really quality linebacker room, in my opinion. It's probably one of the strengths of the team. It's certainly on defense. So I got TJ Edwards on one side. We got Tremaine Edmonds on the other. Guys, blink and you would miss it. This was a slump year for him. And I know people are high on him because he's an athlete. I hear a lot of times there's good value in your league when you draft him. Not really, but I do see the argument. It's true. Another season has passed. Edmonds, had an injury. He's coming off last year's training camp. It bled over into the regular season. True, he did make 4 interceptions. True, he got better in the run support. But again, I'm not a fan of drafting an LB2 where you're seeing him in drafts right now, especially if he's more of a coverage guy anyway. I'll let somebody else take him, and I'll take somebody else, with the better value, especially in these tackle-heavy leagues. especially in these ones, Kyle, that you and I rank for these fantasy pros, tackle heavy scoring. To me, he's a liability. Where a lot of people that don't look at stats like we do feel that he's a name. Another guy
sorry, but I wonder if this is connected to why Edwards is such a value. Is Edmonds is the middle linebacker, and the outside linebackers in a 4-3, like those guys tend not to be as fantasy relevant, but it really does depend on the composition. How effective is that middle linebacker? And it seems like in this case, Edwards is so good from that outside position that it doesn't matter. Because I think with the Eagles, I guess the Eagles were 4-3 as well. Was he more of a middle linebacker with the Eagles?
Yeah. He was the green dot calling all the plays, what have you. And then all of a sudden they moved it to Kaiser White right around their playoff Super Bowl run.
Right. Okay. I remember that. Yeah.
That's what it was. And when he left, like I said, he's always been a quality, low-key tackler. And Edmonds been the opposite. Edmonds more been of an athletic guy running around the backfield. Always coulda, woulda, shoulda seasons. A lot of people, even IDP experts, they love drafting him. And if you're looking at PFF grades right now, people think I'm crazy. Edwards has a PFF of 79.6. Edmonds has a PFF of 56.6. That should tell you something right there. By contrast, we have a third linebacker on this team. He's the unsung hero of this team. He's the backbone of this team. He's got a 67.3. So he's already beaten Edmonds playing from the Sam position while Edmonds plays the Mike, and that's Jack Sanborn. Sanborn actually had a good season coming off the bench, playing for an injured Edmonds. Sanborn actually had 59 tackles, but 48 of those were solos. Especially in leagues with 1, 2, 3 scoring, where you're getting 2 points a tackle, I'm taking him as a perfect last-round stash. That's my guy right there. And then pencil in depth backup roles that are worth noting to me. Noah Sewell, who was a rookie who had bad, bad profiling as not a really good tackler. Well, he's on a good tackling team right now, so he can develop. And then a guy named Mika Baskerville, keep an eye on him. He's a special teams player right now, but he's got good closing speed. He's a guy I kept looking at, in preseason. He can be penciled in, but particularly Sewell, I like. He forced a fumble in week 2 last year. Hopefully he gets in his snapping rotation, especially if a guy goes down. Maybe moving forward, you got a sleeper. So what says you, Kyle?
Well, I think you made a really good point about people are saying Edmonds is the value, but if you can get Sanborn so late, almost undrafted in a sense, he's really the value there. So how often do you see, you are the IDP hunter, so I'm assuming you've been hunting for this information. How often do you see in a 4-3, all 3 linebackers get drafted in an IDP draft?
Right. That's a good point too. Again, people are just assuming the Bears are so bad that they're getting ran on. To be honest, they're getting passed on. It's easier to pass on them than run on them. But and I'll wait for you to do wide receivers. But when I get back to defensive backs, I think this room is cleaned up a lot, and I think it's a younger crew. So I'm kind of excited about the linebacker core, defensive backs. But anything on these wide receivers, Kyle? What's your process here?
Yeah. So I guess the big question: who would I rather take? I think I'd rather have DJ Moore. I think maybe just younger age. We've seen Keenan Allen do really well with rookies, or I guess he did well as a rookie, but then, Justin Herbert rookie season, Keenan Allen was pretty phenomenal. I guess I just wonder, his role in the Chargers has been so volume heavy. Because DJ Moore's there, does this kind of take away from the volume of him? And he's not a 130 target guy like we've seen some seasons in the past. He's closer to 100. Maybe it's the same thing with DJ Moore. What we noticed last year is how big play efficient DJ Moore was. I guess my one fear there is, though, again, I've talked about the step up Justin Fields made, which in a sense coincided with the step up the defense made. That's probably the best quarterback play DJ Moore's ever had in his whole career. And while we do expect Caleb Williams to be good as a rookie, I don't know that it's a given that that's going to be the case this year. Because it feels like every year we said, okay, this is the best quarterback DJ Moore's got. This is the best. And honestly, most years it's true because the bar was set so low for, I think his rookie season, Cam Newton got hurt almost immediately. So he barely got Cam Newton. And by the time he did, it was a very injured. The shoulder problems with Cam Newton made throwing really difficult. Kyle Allen for a while, and then it got slightly better each year. And I think Fields so far, that especially that stretch at the end of the year is the best quality quarterback play DJ Moore's got. If Caleb Williams steps up further on that, then yes, then I think DJ Moore could smash like he did last year. I think he finished as like wide receiver 6. A lot of it was big spike weeks. So he's not going to be a very consistent wide receiver. And with a rookie quarterback, I don't think that's going to be the case. But he could still be a really high ceiling wide receiver on a weekly basis. But yeah, I think I would argue the floor might even be lower this year just because he won't be truly monopolizing targets all by himself.
Yeah, good point. Good point. So this defensive back core, I kind of like them because it's a younger crew. I mean, everyone knows the first person you look at is Jaquan Brisker. I'm not going to waste a lot of time here. We know he's a dog. We know he's a top 10 play in any kind of scoring format. Everybody loves this guy. But what I want to sink my teeth into is the other safety. All-pro safety Kevin Byard actually signed with this team. For those that follow me on Twitter, IDP Hunter, I've been screaming this, and I'm pretty proud of this stat, Kyle, because I'm pretty sure I was the first one to come up with this, okay? As far as the way the Bears team scheme is under Matt Eberflus, we know 2 things are true. This is what he asks out of his secondary. He asks them, 1, to tackle very well, and 2, to take the ball away. Easier said than done, right? So now enters Byard, right? He checks both of those boxes every year. He's got a strong 6.8 per missed tackles. That's it. Eddie Jackson was missing 14.5. So automatically, the top rushing defense, they've gotten instantly better in the safeties with that, right? Also, let's talk about this guy's hands, okay? Byard has 28 career interceptions in 9 seasons. He's entering, I guess he's going to be the quarterback, if you will, of this young, very good, especially in the cornerback department, presence. And that team's only going to grow and get better. Any thoughts on the safeties?
Well, and just to maybe, because Tremaine Edmonds, we talked so bad about him, if he doesn't have the green helmet, if he's not the one calling plays, does that free him up to make better decisions? If Byard's back there doing that, does that help Edmonds in a sense? That'd be, I guess, my first question, just to throw a real wrench into this.
Me personally, I like the green dot player because, again, with IDP, we know that they guarantee themselves 100% snaps, 3-down player kind of role. So he's on the field and he kind of knows the playbook, so he's kind of know where to put people. It's not an absolute, but me personally, I chase the guy who's going to have the green dot. That's just me. It's not always the Mike. Sometimes it's a safety. Sometimes it's a Leo or Will. But that's usually what I do. I chase the guy who's going to be around and make the play. You know what I won't chase? Cornerbacks.
Oh, yeah. I mean, unless you have to start corners. I've seen the leagues where they divide it. Okay, corners, safeties, inside, outside linebacker, tackles, and ends. And you've got to
I'm in the league right now, Kyle. It's a best ball. We're in the 64th round. You have to start 8 defensive backs, and you get 4 points of pass deflection. So I'm pulling these names out. I'll tell them to you right now. Bears got 3 or 4 good ones, and I'll break them down to you. Jalen Johnson, this guy's an all-pro player selection with 4 interceptions. He's got that work ethic, and he's a shadow corner in real-life football. So a lot of people already know who Jalen Johnson is. Not everybody knows Tyreek Stevenson because he had that rookie campaign, but it landed him another 4 interceptions and 16 pass breakups. League scoring like that, I'm looking at the breakups hard. The other guy here, and this is a mixed bag. His name is Kyle Gordon. He's expected to play nickelback in year 3. He did that last season. He was outstanding in that role. Before that, they had him on the outside before Stevenson took the job, right? But he should be more of a valuable IDP player in this new role as he plays the first month of last year. He actually had a broken hand for a good portion of the year. Another rule of thumb I do, in IDP leagues, I usually want the nickel. I want the guy closer to the ball as opposed to the guy on the outside of the ball, But if at anything, penciled in depth, Jalen Jones is your deep guy. But he's more than that. He also plays special teams. He had 355 special team snaps. So I don't know if you're any deep enough leagues that they record tackles like that. I don't have one at the moment, but I used to. But he had 7 solo tackles on in special teams, something to keep an eye on. But this is an excellent assortment of young cornerbacks and an ascending secondary. And I love the linebacker core. They can figure out this pass rush. I think this team, I don't think they're going to contend this year. It's all about putting the pieces together, but I think it would be an interesting IDP outlook. Any closing thoughts on this team there, Kyle?
Well, because they seem so strong at every starting position, the importance of the edge rush, it does make it seem like, if they go defense for that second pick in the first round, it probably will be an edge rusher. It doesn't seem like any other position has quite that position of need. And like looking at mock draft database for their edge rusher rankings, they've only got 4 guys inside with first round ranking grades inside the top 30 even, and 5 guys that have been, in their consensus mock drafts mocked inside the first round. Really, with the mocking, it's 5 guys inside the top 50. So it does seem like it's not a really deep edge rusher class. The other thing too that's funny about the Bears is they only have 4 draft picks. Unless I researched this wrong, they've got the 2 first rounders, they've got their own third rounder, and they traded away every other pick they had because they also got a 4th rounder from the Eagles. But they only have 4 draft picks, so they've also got to be. It does feel like they almost can't afford to be chasing needs. They literally only have 4 shots at this. So you just take the 4 best players who are available to you. So it really does come down to, okay, tackle could be a need, edge rusher could be a need. Those 2 important positions, chasing the quarterback, protecting the quarterback. So they've probably researched those positions a lot. And at 9 of those 2 positions, we might get our choice. But if there's one player at those 2 positions, they might just say, that's how we're going to go. Looking at that, it looks like maybe Dallas Turner from Alabama or Jared Verse from Florida State seem like the top 2 guys. So it seems like they're available. Joe Alt, a tackle, and then my co-host Jesse Hall in the Full Press Packers pod, he actually thinks Talisi Fuaga, a tackle out of Oregon State, is actually better than Joe Alt. So if there's really 4 players that I think the Bears could go, and again, they could go wide receiver, but I think you and I are in agreement here, Steve, to say that because you've got DJ Moore and Allen, it's not as pressing a need as the other spots. But without that many draft picks, they maybe can't replenish the cupboard. I suppose 3rd, 4th round going wide receiver in either of those spots makes sense too. But it's curious to see how they're going to approach the fact that they only have 4 draft picks. It'll be interesting to see.
Gotcha.
Maybe are a team. Maybe they do actually want to trade down from 9 to help. They get a 2nd round pick back, and then that big gap between 9th overall and 75th overall. It's a long time where they're not picking.
All speculative, but what isn't speculative? How great the Packers were. I can't wait to hear your takes on the Packers. This is what I know, Kyle. I know they're 11th best offense, 345.5 average. I know the rushing was good at 15, 112.1. The passing was even better, 233.4. That was 12th. Now, here's where we kind of screw up a little bit, old Green Bay. You got the total defense, 17th. 335.1. The rushing defense, 128.3. That was 28th. Passing defense, 206.8, which was 9th. I will tell you, Kyle, and correct me if I'm wrong, just watching games this year, it just looked like they couldn't get turnovers when they needed them to. I seen it in the playoffs, but I'm talking about it may be a better real life defense than they were actually for IDP. What says you about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's every year. I've joked about this for so many years. The Swiss cheese defense in terms of run defense. There's just holes everywhere. You run right through them again. You mentioned it, 28th again. So and you know what? That's almost by design. And I think since Joe Barry had taken over as defensive coordinator, he's openly talked about the fact that he really doesn't care about the run game. He cares. His whole front 7 obsession is just about pass rush.
Interesting you said that too, because I wrote that in the IDPs or on the IDP Plus article. So with that being said, the defense coordinator Joe Barry, he got fired a few days before I even wrote the thing. Actually, he got fired the divisional playoffs before when I was writing. But anyway, enter Jeff Hatley, who he's likely going to change this from a 3-4 to 4-3 because that's his pension. He's a 3-4 guy. But like you just said, the way Barry would try to run, he'd try to rush 5 off the line of scrimmage. I don't expect to see that in his team scheme. I think it's more unique the way Hatley runs his schemes. And I don't know if you know this, and I'll save it for the linebackers, but he has a relationship with these players, Kyle Shanahan, what have you. He actually coached up Isaiah McDuffie in college, and he was a second team All-Pac Pro. So he may be able to we might see McDuffie as a sleeper next year.
Yeah, that's interesting. And again, you did mention it, the change to a 4-3. It looks like McDuffie ends up being the main backup inside linebacker to behind Quay Walker. And maybe do they start rotating? Does seem like Quay Walker will be the green dot guy, just because what's really has changed about this team also is the secondary. But yeah, so McDuffie, I think, unfortunately, it looks like he'll be a backup. Um, Although I suppose with this team changing from a to a like where they're instead of
Yep.
Rashawn Gary being an outside linebacker now, suddenly all these great pass rushers are probably going to play defensive end. So I guess the chance for McDuffie to get on the field is to play as an outside linebacker.
I'll save it for the linebacker talk, but in all reality, when McDuffie and Hatley were together at Boston College, and this was the tweet I did, McDuffie was a second team All ACC honor, and he was fifth in the nation with 107 tackles. So there was a live televised game. It was against Notre Dame of all teams. He had 16 tackles. So there's hope there. And we seen McDuffie last year, whenever Campbell or Walker would go down, he was like the ultimate rotation piece. There's hope there that he can generate some play just because the coach knows him. So there may be a sleeper there. For my audience at home, we pulled up PFF and we're kind of looking at the depth chart. I'll give it back to you, Kyle. What do you say for team needs?
So I think that the team needs are probably like really broadly most of the defense, to be honest. I think what they have now is good, but they can definitely afford to upgrade at certain spots. I think defensive back, defensive line, really anywhere in the secondary you can add pieces, I think is good. I think Eric Stokes hasn't quite been up to a first round billing so far through his career. Anthony Johnson was a rookie last year. They took him super late in the draft. I know my co-host Jesse Hall, he was super excited. He thought that was a guy that should have maybe even gone day 2, but certainly I think they got him in the 6th, maybe even 7th round, and he should have really, in Jesse's mind anyway, should have been like a 4th rounder at worst. He also had to play a lot more last year than expected because Darnell Savage got hurt so much.
On that point, yeah, I put cornerback. I'll give you my 3. I had cornerback because that seems to be an issue. Anybody opposite of Jared Alexander, generally that left CB spot, it's critical. You had Eric Stokes trying to fill in there. He went to IR. Carrington Valentine's been iffy. Nixon's an interesting one to me, but he serves more as a kick returner. I know he's an all-pro, whatever, but they need help. I put for my other 2 team needs, I put cornerback, I put tackle, and I put guard. What says you about that offensive line? How do you feel about them?
So yeah, I could divide it to the 3 main needs are DB, D-line, and O-line, and then you can divide them further, right? And I think defensive back, you could argue, you might want to upgrade on Anthony Johnson, you might want to upgrade on Eric Stokes. You can kind of go either way with that one. D-line as well, it feels like you just need that second really good interior guy next to Kenny Clark to help dominate from the inside, especially now that you're bringing down Rashad Gary as a full-time defensive end. Preston Smith as well. They have Lucas Van Ness. So they've got good defensive end depth, which is that's probably the one position that's really not a need, and that's great because I think especially for almost every other NFC North team, that's one of the main positions of need is that edge rusher, defensive end guy, and that is such an important position to have in the NFL. So it's great that the Packers, they've got their quarterback solid, they've got their edge rushers solid, and like those are arguably the 2 most important positions. So it's great to be in that spot.
Any thoughts on the quarterback or the offensive line or even the tight end position in here? Is there anything you're looking at? Any thoughts here?
The O-line, I think it look, and you can see, if anyone who could read the chart, it does look like there's 5 projected starters. And if they have to go into the season with those 5, I think they'll be fine. That's at least an average group, if not above average. But I would say of those 5 players, to me, there's only 2 that are locked in starters. And because they're both pretty versatile players, I don't even know if they're locked into those spots necessarily because they can afford to move them around. Now, last year, Elton Jenkins and Zach Tom mostly played left guard and right tackle respectively. So I think you pencil them into those spots now, and which makes the other 3 positions the positions where you could upgrade: left tackle, center, and right tackle.
That's what I was worried about when I said tackle, because they released that injury. What's his name? David
Bakhtiari.
Yeah. And then the hope is they can maybe reload here. They got away with Zach Tom. He won the job in the preseason. Maybe he's a developmental future player. Left tackle backup, you got a guy named Rashid Walker.
Yeah,
he fills in from time to time, but I don't know. I think
he did have to start a lot last year. He might have started I think, double-digit games just because of how little Bakhtiari played. They also had Josh Nijman, and they were a strange team last year at that left tackle
Yeah,
spot because it really was a rotation. Like whoever was starting wouldn't play 100% of the snaps. So now
that's what pops out to me too. Yeah, it's like in musical
Nijman
chairs. I wouldn't
signed
want to gamble with it.
Nijman signed somewhere else. So it really does feel like if Walker's starting, and I think the rotation we saw it less at the end of the year. Like I don't think it really happened in the playoffs much. Walker did struggle. He played well to start. Like those first couple games where he's kind of thrown in there, it seemed like he was good, and then maybe just got a little overwhelmed, maybe physically, mentally. The week in, week out, that's where it gets tough. And like the mid portion of the season is where we saw Nijman a lot more.
There's
Towards
a
the end of
guard
the season,
there's a guard you guys have. His name is John Runyon. He's also a free agent last time I looked.
I
So
think he signed with the Giants, to be honest. But yeah,
there
he's
it
gone,
is.
and he's started. I think he's basically started like every game at guard for them the past 2 seasons, and that even came out of nowhere because he was he was a lower round pick, depth player for the first couple seasons. In the last, like really in 2022, with Bakhtiari being hurt so much, and Elton Jenkins, he tore his MCL, so he only ended up playing I think 4 or 5 games. Runyon was arguably their best offensive lineman in 2022. Last year, though, with Jenkins playing basically the full season, and Zach Tom, I thought really did well. And if you look at these grades, it looks like he is the best graded player PFF wise. So Runyon almost seemed like the weak link on the offensive line at times, and that could be the case here too. Because right now, draft pick from a couple years ago, Sean Ryan, I think is the kind of penciled in as the starting guard. He has no starting experience. Like he might have. I don't even think he started because Runyon got hurt. He might have missed a start. So I think maybe Sean Ryan missed a start, but or Sean Ryan got a start at one point. But he's got the least amount of experience here. So yeah, I think right guard could be a spot where they could dress in the first round even. And they picked 25th. So by the time they're picking, if like, okay, do we want to upgrade on Rasheed Walker? We might be able to do that with like the 6th, 7th best tackle. They might have the best guard or one of the 2 best interior offensive linemen available to them at 25. So that could be a position where they get their immediate upgraded starter right now. I know my co-host Jesse really likes the guy out of Duke, whose name I just forgot. Graham Barton.
Okay.
He's almost Jesse's like ideal pick in the first round if they go offense. Because I think if they're not going to draft an offensive lineman in the first round, they should go defense because their receiving core is so deep, they don't need to add a first rounder, I don't think.
And I was just thinking that I think with this team, where our eyes are on the quarterback, wide receiver, we like the secondary, what have you, right? I think the offensive and defensive lines is kind of where we're sinking our teeth into. Transition from a 3-4 to a 4-3. I'm not exactly sure where players are going to run, so I'm kind of just going to kind of slur the DL and linebacker kind of together. Defensive line, I'm a little concerned with. In the 3 games last season, there was 3 games particularly that I'm thinking of that they got gashed. There was actually 4 bad games if you want to add. Let's say 4. So 3 or 4 of those games horrible against the run. They got ran up for over 200 plus yards by their opponent. So blame the unit, blame the scheme, whatever you want.
That first Lions game was brutal. I remember that one. David Montgomery had a.
But I'm not going to blame Kenny Clark. Kenny Clark made the Pro Bowl, and he led the team in sacks. That's pretty hard to do from a 1 tech, 2 tech. I think he's playing nose tackle a lot of times. 3 tech too. He can be moved all over the place.
Yeah.
Statistically, usually every year, he is one of those guys that's up there in the metrics with QB hits. So if you get a point or 2 in your leagues for QB hits, I'm not afraid to get a Kenny Clark there. The other 2 guys, defensive lineman wise, Slayton and Wyatt, they're a little bit inconsistent, on again, off again, on again, off again. Throw in Carl Brooks, who kind of emerged, but he showcased himself that he can be a good pass rusher time to time. But they're going to need somebody heavy. I know we got edge rushers we can talk about in a minute, but they're going to need somebody who could, I guess, handle the run support. Any thoughts there?
It just feels like anytime Kenny Clark's not on the field is when those big runs happen. And at defensive tackles aren't going to play 100% of the snaps. I mean, I think ideally what they want him is to keep him fresh and have him play, maybe 2/3 of the snaps, 3/4, 75% at very most. So what do you do with those other 25% of the snaps? If he's not out there, it seems like, you're forcing the linebackers to have to make miracle plays because the interior of the line just caves when he's not out there. So I think it would make sense in the first round if there's what looks like an elite or top tier defensive tackle prospect. Now, they did that a couple years ago with Devontae Wyatt, so those won't always pan out. And I mean, there's still time. Devontae Wyatt, I think, still has 2 years left on his rookie contract. So does he take the step up in year 3 and make it so that their first round addition at defensive tackle this year doesn't come where they draft him this year? It's that Wyatt takes that step up to be that first rounder that he was drafted to be.
Right. And if you don't mind, I'm going to keep, because I don't know who that fourth guy is going to be. So I'm just going to kind of combine the linebackers here. If you don't mind, and I'll give it back to you on offense. No, we're going to go a little out of order here, but
I kind of did that with the Bears. So yeah, it's only fair.
Yeah. Devondre Campbell, he was released. So that's leaving Quay Walker with the LB1 opportunity there. Okay. Weak side linebacker starter here. Okay. Walker did have a great, strong finish, at least half the season. He had 65 tackles by week 8, and we're all pumping it up. But then all of a sudden, he kind of cooled off a bit. He did finish with 118 tackles, but compared to his 121 tackles last year, kind of sort of people are a little lower, but I'm expecting him to be better. I already mentioned McDuffie on the other side. I already mentioned him as an off-ball linebacker playing with his old coach from Boston College. I already mentioned that. He actually played because both linebackers kept getting hurt. He played 46.17 in defensive snaps last season compared to the actual starter. Campbell only had 51.76. So for a lot of the time last year, I was getting away with McDuffie as a cheap LB2. So consider that the floor there. The other guy is recently re-signed Eric Wilson. Okay, he's known. I guess the audience would know him as the guy who had the key fumble in the divisional playoff game against the 49ers. That's really all I know him for. I don't know about you, but he's a special teamer. Christian Young's a converted safety. I guess this is an okay depth piece. The outside linebackers, this is kind of the cream of the crop that you were alluding to. Rashad Gary, likely the 4th DL. He finished with 9 sacks and 22 QB hits, 2 forced fumbles, and a recovery. He's on the right step in the right direction. Just 100% health out of Gary. Let him go, wind him up, get him started. We got old school Preston Smith, who has that hybrid role. He's got a really strong win-pass rush rate, decent, 11.5. He had 8 sacks, 21 QB hits. Everyone takes him for granted. Now, I'll tell you who no one takes for granted. Overdrafted a lot is Lucas Van Ness, and I'm waiting to see it. We started to see signs of life out of him, the 21-year-old, the 13th overall pick last year. He had 4 sacks, 7 QB hits, 18 tackles. I'm going to say post-Thanksgiving weekend, he continued to excel in the playoffs. He showcased himself there. But those are my usual suspects, those who I have penciled in as starters. So does PFF. Any thoughts on that edge? Any thoughts on that linebacker core?
I think the one thing with Preston Smith is there a chance they keep him as an outside linebacker? They keep his linebacker designation because smart veteran, pretty good in coverage for a guy that is as good at pass rushing as he is. And then that would allow, to your point, the first rounder last year, Lucas Van Ness, to get in there as the other starting defensive end opposite of Rashad Gary. So in that sense, the idea of, again, going offensive tackle in the first round might make sense if you want to go with that configuration. And that way you feel like, okay, the next few picks will boost to the secondary and then maybe, again, address that defensive tackle spot. We don't really have to really go much on the edge rushers or even an outside linebacker because Smith has that kind of coverage capacity. Now, they might also just love him as a pass rusher so much that they'll bring in another outside linebacker and keep Smith as the defensive end. I guess really keep him as the O-line and move him defensive end if that's what they're doing.
And there's no guarantee they're going to switch from 3-4 to 4-3, but I thought that you said that after.
It seems, Halfland, I believe, kind of heavily hinted at it in his press conference. And he talked about like how, teams only use base formation so much. So they'll incorporate maybe some 3-4 into there just because he knows these players have the skill set to play it. But I think it's almost a foregone conclusion that their base defense will be 4.
Yeah, I do too. And like I said,
I have one more name. Sorry, I was going to mention. Especially if Preston Smith is retained as an outside linebacker, that main backup defensive end is probably Kingsley and Igbare. And kind of like Van Ness last year, they sort of rotated both of them in regularly, and it seems like it worked because a lot of times, whenever Van Ness was on the field, he was usually making some impact. A few sacks for very little time on the field, and Igbare to a certain extent had a few pressures too for not having a ton of snaps. Barry, I mean, he tore his ACL the previous year, so it wasn't for sure certain he was going to start week 1. He was available, and he ended up playing most of the snaps this year, more than I think what would have been expected before the season.
You said this, and I thought this was a very smart take. You said this earlier when we brought the team up. Joe Barry, he was notorious for, we'll stop the run on the way to quarterback. He was bringing 5-man rush sets, and that could be the reason why the rushing defense, sucked. When you got Hatley has a tendency, regardless of the scheme, to run 4-man fronts, and that's it. And he'll usually do it in a cover 1 or a cover 3 scheme, as opposed to Barry, who would run, up to 5 players all the time. So I'm sure that's exhausting. And, sometimes it works well. Sometimes you get got. And, he ran that all last season. So I thought that was a smart take.
And one of the things that I think we can just talk all about defense here, and we'll do offense later, the effects on the secondary, because it also seems like Barry, again, his whole thing is pass rush. And I know he signed on with the linebacker coach with the Dolphins. And so that's, again, everything that's going to involve the pass rush, the front 7. It seems like a lot of times the secondary was an afterthought in the scheme. It's just, okay, do this pass rush, throw a zone back there. Just throw everyone play off zone. And
I noticed that too.
It's been a problem the whole time. I know Jesse and I haven't complained so much on the Full Press Packers Pod, but I see it on X, and all Packers fans for the last 2-3 years have been screaming, have cornerbacks play press coverage. Just Jair can do it. He's a very physical corner. Why is he playing 7-8 yards off when he can just kind of shut guys down at the start of the route?
So if we want to keep going with defensive back, there's 2 guaranteed starters here. You got the free agent signing of Xavier McKinney, which I'm really excited about. 388 bucks. What was that?
Number 1 player on to Jesse and I, we talked about it. He was the number 1 guy on both our minds free agency.
Yep.
Because moving on from Darnell Savage and Jonathan Owens, who we both really liked. It also means we lose Simone Biles, which kind of sucks. Great supporter of the Packers. Now I think he went to the Bears. Now Simone Biles is a Bears fan. That just I don't like that.
You know what's neat about McKinney though? He's only 25 years old. Yeah. He played 388 of his snaps in the box, and the other 167 in the slot. So he's going to be a strong IDP weapon all of 2024. Sign me up for that.
He might be the best IDP player for the Packers. I think that's not, again, like probably Quay Walker would be the other guy, maybe McDuffie if he can get enough tackles. But like if I'm handicapping who I would draft in an IDP spot first, McKinney's probably second among the Packers. Maybe probably Walker, just because we've seen him just accumulate tons of tackles.
In the secondary, the second guy would be, the corner Jared Alexander. He's a shutdown guy. We know about him. Injuries kind of threw him off last year, and that could be the cause of the defense declining. The other players are kind of.
They also traded Rasul Douglas away mid-season, and so there was a point where all 3 of your there was a point in the season where all 5 of their starting defensive backs that would have been like week 1 starters were all gone.
Yeah,
and it was Valentine, Keyshawn Nixon at corner, and then again Jonathan Owens and Anthony Johnson at safety. Like that, none of those guys were the planned starter at any of those positions.
So Anthony Johnson Jr., I'm rocking it right now until I'm told otherwise, and PFF's thinking the same thing. I think he's your other safety. Last year, he played 27% of the team snaps. So perhaps there is a plan for him after all. There's 2 Anthony Johnsons, you guys at home, because I've been kind of tweeting him out. Anthony Johnson, I've been picking up in like the 50th round of best balls because people aren't really paying attention to him. He's a free safety to me. If I can get him, he's free in my leagues. Be careful.
Free safety, that's nice.
What's that?
Free safety, that's awesome. That's a great pun.
And then there's 2 Anthony Johnsons on this team. One of them's a cornerback. I had to look up to see which one's number. So I'm kind of like letting everybody know right now, you want the one that's labeled safety. You want the one with the jersey number 36. The other guy, I don't know. He's just kind of a throw-in. But those are my 3 that I'm keeping an eye on: McKinney, Johnson, Alexander. The 4th man, this corner, I have no idea. We know Nix is an all-time kick returner. Stokes was a disaster last year. He appeared in 2 games. He couldn't cover. Corey Ballantyne showed promise in zone. I don't know. He needs work in man. And then the other guy, the doppelganger, the Anthony Johnson.
Yeah.
He's the Spider-Man gif when he's pointing fingers at the real Spider-Man. So I don't know.
Even with all the injuries, I don't think he even really got on the field much because it was mostly Ballantyne and Valentine, which could be really confusing. Carrington and Valentine and Corey Ballantyne. There's a lot of games where they were starting. But yeah, it does lead to back to corner could be a position of need. The one thing I'll say about Keyshawn Nixon, I thought he was like in that period where it was all backup defensive backs. I thought he was the best of them. His role, especially as the slot corner, I think he might not like retain it. They gave him a nice extension this year. That was not just kick returner money. It was slot corner money. I think it was 18 million over 3 years. So I could see them wanting to upgrade Stokes and leave Keyshawn Nixon as a starter as the nickel corner.
Like I'm in a 32 team league and I have Nixon and I play him and it's a kick return, I get bonus. So if anybody,
that's what I was gonna say, especially if it's a league with kick return bonuses, he is their main kick returner. And
the
smart returns many punts, but
yeah, if it's 0.75 or greater, I'm going to exploit that, put him as DB. But the smart thing is I just showed you the cornerback room is kind of bare. If they don't fix it, he's going in. But I will tell you something, Kyle. This IDP draft class, it's not the greatest, but it runs deep at corner. There's like 8 guys I wouldn't mind starting in leagues, and like a couple of them are 5-star recruits. So if they want to really exploit this draft, they can plug it in. Same thing with guard and tackle. They can make their money if those are our perceived weaknesses.
And again, I think even back to just offensive line, I don't think it's out of the question that they go with another center as well. Because Josh Myers, he also really struggled last year too. There were times where Runyon was the weak link. There were times, especially early in the season, where Josh Myers seemed like the weak link. He got better as the season went on, though. So maybe he's done enough. I think he still has. I think it's 2 years left on his rookie contract. It might just be 1. So they could also just see him out through that rookie contract as a starter and then find a center down the line. But yeah, it does seem like, left tackle, right guard would be, in theory, the positions they'd go after, if not corner. But again, it does lead to the original point. Defensive tackle might be the biggest spot of need they go in the first, especially if you're saying corner is so deep. Mm-hmm. If they are going to address on defense, go help that pass rush out. Get Kenny Clark that extra help that he needs, that you can really spill him in. If you can just have Kenny Clark play only 67% of the snaps, he's probably dominating almost every one of those snaps with enough rest in between.
I know you're a homer with this, but I mean, it's a young team, young offense, defense. They fixed the defense. What do you say, a top 4 team in the NFC? What are you thinking?
Yeah, and I think we assume they'll fix the defense. I think one of it's funny how they were ranked so well in passing last year, but it seemed like it was a big problem.
Yeah,
I don't see it being the case because we talk about Hafley and like his 4-3 tendency. His like most of his defensive play calling, actually all of it, has come in college. He has NFL experience though. He was a defensive backs coach for 3 different teams: the 49ers, the Browns, and the Buccaneers from 2013 through 2018. Ryan Downard, who was their DB coach last year, he was one of the few defensive coaches that was actually retained by Hafley. And that spoke strongly to me because he was not afraid to, I think only 2 of the actual primary main coaches on the defense were actually retained, and 1 was even promoted. But he almost cleaned house for this defensive coaching staff. So for him to single out Downard and say, not only I'm keeping you, but I'm keeping you in the one spot where I used to be. So he must see something in Downard that, yes, you get what it is to be a DB coach, because I know I've been there and I see that within you. So that's probably really strong. That's 2 guys with previous defensive backs coach experience. And then they had another player. Derek Ansley, who they hired as the defensive passing game coordinator. He was the Chargers defensive coordinator last year.
Oh, okay.
Under Staley. Now, wasn't calling plays, I don't think, with Staley doing that. But he was a DB coach with the Chargers a couple years before, 2021 through 22. He was also a defensive backs coach with the Raiders. So that's 3 coaches on this staff who either currently are or have defensive back coaching experience, which that also means there's probably going to be, unlike with the Joe Barry room, a big emphasis on the secondary. Yeah,
true. Before we go on to the next team, any closing thoughts as far as like the offense? I know we all kind of know who those guys are, but you have any thoughts with the Packers in general?
Yeah, I think wide receiver is going to be interesting. I think especially between Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. And you know what? Maybe they go a second-round wide receiver for the 3rd year in a row and throw that guy in the mix of who will be the top target on the team.
Isn't Watson funny? Like everyone takes him first, and he ends up being like the wide receiver 3 or 4. No telling.
Well, I mean, he's got such good weekly ceiling. We saw it. I mean, he was hurt a lot last year. It happened even before the season. I suppose that happened his rookie year too, where he started, got hurt, and then came on really strong. He started to come on strong, but then his hamstring injury acted up again for a second time. He's got good ceiling, but I think Jaden Reed is probably going to see not only an increase in snaps because of his reliability last year, but the idea of him being the slot receiver in this Matt LaFleur offense, that's a position they've emphasized a lot. With Davante Adams is there, Matt LaFleur had no problems moving him into the slot. We're just going to get you quick, easy targets because we know you can get open in an instant. Over the middle, yards after catch, we're going to really help and scheme Davante Adams open. He doesn't need help to be schemed open, but if he's going to be the main guy, let's just pepper that slot receiver with targets. And it's almost more Matt LaFleur did it for him. I want Adams as my slot receiver. He doesn't need to, but I want to orchestrate my offense around the slot receiver. And it seems like Rodgers, that was something they coincide on. That's a position he's often targeted a lot. So I'm sure Rodgers is happy to give me Adams there. So that scheme aspect of that part of the Matt LaFleur offense, just how much they emphasize the slot receiver, I think it means Reed is the guy you'll want the most. Just he'll have the most consistent targets. Christian Watson might still have enough spike weeks to make him worth drafted too. But yeah, like if you're saying, Steve, where Watson's still the one that's going first, that probably means he's going to be more of an avoid than certainly some of the other guys.
Most drafts, ADP, like why are they doing it, man? I can get a Wicks and I can get a Reed way cheaper,
Romeo Dubs. And then, I mean, if you want to just supersede the wide receivers and go right to the tight ends, Musgrave and Kraft,
man,
I wonder if the presence of both of them also caps where they're going in drafts, and they might both be really good values. There's no shortage of weapons, that's for sure, which means that they don't really need to address the position in the draft, but they probably still will anyway, because outside of Josh Jacobs, well, and I guess now Aaron Jones on his 1-year contract, which is cheap enough to be a rookie contract, every skill position player that matters here is on a rookie contract. And so the way you keep that going is just you keep drafting them, and you constantly have these rookie contracts. And it'll be interesting in a couple of years when it's time to pay these guys who they choose to prioritize, because Watson and Dubs will be the same season. Will they be able to pay both of them the same year? Reed will be the following year. And I mean, where are they going to, how many of those three are still going to be on the team in a couple of years? Maybe none of them, to be honest. Maybe if they we'll see if they hit on a second rounder this year, I suppose.
And they might end up having a rebuild like the Vikings are right now. And that's our next team, the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings total offense was 10th, 347.8. Rushing was 29th, 91.4. We see a problem there. Passing, 5th, 256.4, considering all the musical chairs they had, right? The defense, now the coach is defensive minded, so this is kind of interesting here. Total defense ranked 16th, 333.2. Passing defense, 8th, 98.7. Rushing defense. Passing defense was 24th, 234.5. I know Brian Flores, he came to Minnesota with a chip on his shoulder. And I don't know if you know this, Kyle. Well, you do because you love this division. They were the most blitztastic, if that's a word. I'm making it up now. I'm going to patent it. Blitztastic scheme in 2023. They blitzed 48% of the time, and they actually achieved 60 hurries, 43 sacks along the way. They outplayed the defense talent-wise. Unfortunately, Kirk Cousins got hurt, and we suffered that bad quarterback carousel. And they did have a run, but they came up short, and they didn't make it to the playoffs. What says you about the Vikings?
This is a team that's gone through a lot of transformation. You have your quarterback and your best edge rusher that just basically walked away. Kirk Cousins went to Atlanta. Daniil Hunter, I forget where he went, but he's been arguably their best pass rusher for most of the time he's been there, to be honest. So it's just those two key positions.
Hunter went to the Texans.
Texans. Funny because the guy that Vikings are likely replacing him with, Jonathan Grenard, comes from the Texans. So they almost made a trade between those two.
Ain't that something? That's funny how that works. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess, hey, we're not paying this guy. We have money to free up to pay this guy. And it's just the perpetual cycle between those two. And I guess Grenard's younger. So I guess the Vikings, maybe more of a rebuild, wanted to get younger. Texans seem like, okay, we saw enough from Stroud last year. We're going for it this year. We're all in. Rookie contract, quarterback. Let's try and win the Super Bowl this year. Daniil Hunter probably helps us do that more on a 1-year basis. They're not even worried about next year. The Texans are all in on 2024. So it makes sense for both teams why they made that change in that signing, those signings.
So let me show. I'll give you my 3 team needs. What I
Sure.
thought they needed, and then I'll pick your brain and see how you want to go. I put quarterback at 1, and at the time I wrote this article, it's still holding strong. The Vikings traded up in the NFL draft. Man, they got that free first out of the Texans, pretty much, and they just kept moving forward, right? So they're assuring themselves a chance at a top 4 play caller. I don't think they're happy with Sam Darnold. They say they are, but I don't know. Will it be enough? Last season, in my opinion, was proof that they need an heir apparent. That musical chair thing was probably the reason why they missed the darn playoffs. So I put quarterback as 1. I don't really care for the guard situation. That's my opinion at 2. The guards, there was no one on that offensive line that made it through the season without injuries. It was a brutal year for
had
guard.
a good guard, and they traded him away, Ezra Cleveland. So
yeah,
like that
and then
might have been able to
they had
build
a guy.
around, but they didn't want to pay
Dalton
him.
Reiser, he left in free agency too. And Blake Bandel, good luck if you knew who that was. I didn't. He's starting according to PFF. And then my third was cornerback. Cornerback's a unit that got abused. They were 24th per PFF. With this draft class being so heavy, just like the Packers, I can just see them targeting it. Quarterback guard, cornerback.
Sorry, I was just going to say with Brandel real quick, he was a 6th rounder in 2020. So it seems like he's been a project that they've drafted, developed, and now I think he's emerging now. Ed Ingram as well, 2nd rounder a couple years ago. So it does. I was also going to say that as a need, to be honest.
Quarterback, guard, cornerback were my 3. Did you see any other team needs, weaknesses? Seems like they need a lot of stuff, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I think you could argue it's like even with Grenard being there, they still like even if they had if they had been able to keep Grenard and Hunter, maybe the pass rush is good. I guess they did bring Andrew Van Ginkel from Minnesota, but it still feels like they need another pass rusher, whether it's an interior or outside guy. So I would just say pass rush in general.
Makes sense.
But corner also could make sense. I could see why like Byron Murphy.
It's fun going back and looking at these videos now and talking with you because, like, I wrote this a couple months ago, and I'm like, it still holds true. I think I don't trust Byron Murphy. He was hot and cold. He gave up 6 touchdowns last year, I think it was. Yeah, so
safeties are incredible, but it does feel like if they're going to go anywhere on the defensive backfield, corner does make sense. So I think honestly your 3 quarterback, guard, and corner do make sense as the team needs. I think I don't think they could, like, for the sake of Justin Jefferson, like wanting to stay there and be willing to sign an extension. I don't think they can. They have to kind of show something. So it seems like they're destined to draft a rookie quarterback. We'll see if they. I mean, there's 6 guys being talked about first rounders, so they may also feel like if they like all 6 of them better than Sam Darnold, which I don't think is a stretch. Do they just sit and wait? I know there's a lot of talk of them trading up, but do they feel like there's enough quarterbacks here that the other teams are going to have to trade up to go get their guys, and that could still leave us standing where we are and maybe getting a guy we really like. So I wonder if they just stick at 11. But
flipping you back to offense, I'm looking at this offensive line. I'm looking at the quarterback. I'm looking at tight end. Anything to highlight here? Anything you're thinking about?
Well, I think TJ Hawkinson's going to be a guy. It's format dependent for me. I think because of his ACL injury and because of all the other young tight ends emerging, I think he's become a value in dynasty leagues. Now, I've also dropped him in my rankings. I think at one point last year during the season when he was smashed, and I had him as my number 1 tight end in dynasty, and then a late season ACL MCL tear, and suddenly I think he's like tight end 6 or 7 for me. But I feel like that's the kind of sentiment across the board to where he's dropped in value in dynasty. That's the format I want to roster him in. I kind of want to avoid him in redraft though, because we have no idea when he's returning. Especially until if you can draft late enough in August and you've seen him at least in training camp and it looks like okay he might miss a week or 2, that's one thing. But tight end's a position where, especially in redraft leagues, I'm going week to week. I spoke about, I guess I can't remember if this was on the show, it was so long ago, it might have been before, but talking about like the couple weeks last year where I kind of spiked in tight end rankings with the fantasy rankings. It's because I'm just chasing targets, and so I'm really aggressive on tight end. If I don't draft the earlier late strategy, I've been playing that way for seems like a decade now. If I don't get an early tight end, I'm going to take someone in the last round because I'm likely just cutting them week 1 anyway when I see there's someone else who's emerged that got more targets than the guy I've drafted. So I'm notorious to do that. Now this year, I feel like that top tier is maybe more, there's more guys available than there is usually that you would consider, okay, worthy of being drafted. And that also adds into the fact why I don't want to take Hawkinson, because it's especially how early it'll be, even if he is tight end, 10 off the board, still feel like I'll just go get tight end 25 off the board, cut him anyway when there's someone that we all miss that, he was tight end 30 and no one drafted him, but he ends up being a tight end week one. I'll go chase those guys. And because of that, I don't really want to hold a tight end in redraft. I don't want to be taking Hawkinson and having to take another guy and then basically wasting a bench spot. So I don't really love saying I'm avoiding players entirely, but I kind of feel that way with Hawkinson, just the way I play. I'm going to avoid him entirely in redraft, but I still think he's a good dynasty buy because of all the concerns there is with him. And now the concerns at quarterback too. I think it's just his price is just constantly dropping. So maybe now, before they draft a QB, if you want to trade for Hawkinson, now is probably the time to do it. If once they draft a rookie QB, it's probably going to inflate his price, even if we all expect it to happen right now anyway. But the confirmation of seeing it does kind of have that effect.
I don't see them being safe with Sam Darnold. I think there's a lot of coach speak there. I wouldn't be happy with him as a starter. I think they're going all in for a quarterback. They might even move up again.
Yeah, they might have to. I mean, if they really eye in, there aren't 6 guys we like. There are only 4 or even 3. Then yeah, that's where if there are only 3 guys we like, we're desperate to trade up with the Patriots at 3, but we'll see.
So when I wrote this article, I did a little bit of guesswork on defensive line. I'm so happy that PFF has caught up to it. So we're in agreement right now. So for defensive line, and I actually agree with you, Kyle, I don't think this is a very good unit, but I do think that they helped stop the run. So it isn't as bad as I guess I originally wrote it, as imagined it. We'll start with Harrison Phillips, who, again, that just goes to show you how long you can stream defensive tackle nowadays. You could punt the position and still end up good. Harrison Phillips, an unknown, the 14-team startup. Hey, he was my starter. He actually finished with 92 tackles. That's pretty darn good. That's a standard right there. You got
especially
also
for the interior guys. They're not maybe usually hitting 60, 70 tackles. It's all about the pressures and how many double teams they command than actually providing stats. So pretty good.
You got a lot of interior pieces. You got a guy named Jonathan Buller, and you got a guy like Jeffrey Tillery. They're just stopgap players at this point, but still they can eat up blocks because the other 2 guys, again, I was assuming it's a bit of a tricky one, but PFF has it the same way. I think DJ Wonham, who's number 2 in sacks, and Daniel Hunter, which was the guy, they left in free agency. So the replacements in my mind are Jonathan Greener, who's a lot younger than Hunter is, right? Last season, Jonathan Greener had 12.5 sacks, 15 tackles for a loss. If you play in those 2-pointers, those 1, 2, 3 scoring, you're getting 2-point tackle for loss. Sign me up for that. Okay,
doubled up the leading sack getters for 2 teams, Washington and Chicago.
And then the thing with Greener, right? He played opposite side of a rookie last year, Will Anderson, the top defensive. So, time will tell if he's actually a DE1, but he's getting that sweet spot Daniel Hunter role. The other guy we know is Andrew Van Ginkel, who at times showed up on again, off again when they allowed him play, but he ended up producing 6 sacks on an off again role, 19 QB hits, 8 tackles for a loss. He has experience with this coach when they played in Miami. So he's regarded as well. PFF has him as an excellent run defender. Van Ginkel can play that position. And I think this may be the time, if people are sitting on Greener, that you can actually start him, because his snaps haven't been there. Looking at the way this line shapes up, you got a lot of interior guys, and you only got those 2 guys playing the edge. But look how PFF has him graded, 91.1 overall. That's a solid run defender. So I think he's going to be the other DL. What says you about this defensive line?
No, I think you summed it up pretty well, to be honest. Now, I guess with all this personnel changing, is there any chance they change scheme? Are they going to what were they playing last year? I can't remember. 3-4, 4-3. Yeah,
so what they do is I'm trying to remember the name of it right now. It's called the Tiles, okay? So it's not a 4-3, it's not a 3-4. Brian Flores it's kind of a high school football called the Tiles. And what it is, I tweeted this as well. Basically, everybody tries to control the center of the field, and it pushes everyone else to run sweeps and go outside. And then they allow their safeties and corners to make plays. Tiles is a very easy scheme to pull off. But that's just the kind of hard-nosed, aggressive kind of play that Flores will run. He'll throw a 4-3 at you. He'll throw a 3-4 at you. Predominantly, you've seen a lot of nickel last year, and I'll explain why when I get to defensive backs. But yeah, it's not necessarily the format. It's more of the system, and it's a tiles-based system because they want to control the center of the field. They want to be bullies on the field.
And I guess would that almost look a little bit similar? I guess maybe not as much depth as, but like a similar concept to what Joe Barry and say Don Capers were running with the Packers, which it's not just Joe Barry's doing that. Like, let's put 5 guys up on the line of scrimmage. That was kind of a Don Capers thing and Mike Pettin thing too. So that it's funny. The Packers kind of have 3 really similar defensive coordinators, and now they've gone completely opposite with Halfland. And you know what? It's kind of been going with a similar theme last few years, and nothing's really been working. So I like the idea of them completely departing. Now with the Vikings, though, you've got Brian Flores who has success. So yeah, if he's had success with the scheme and at multiple stops, may as well stick with it. So yeah, that's a good point. Thanks for explaining the tiles thing.
Yeah, it's neat. I have a tweet. I'll forward it to you. I kind of broke that down, when he came on board. The line's going to make or break them, to be honest. We'll get into the linebackers in a second. What do you have for offense?
So I guess with the offensive line, I think there's a few good pieces. Christian Darashaw at left tackle, Garrett Bradbury at center. These are first-round picks. They did have Ezra. They did have 3 first-rounders on the line last year before trading away Ezra Cleveland. So it looks like those 2 spots are probably the most secure. It's funny. This is the exact opposite of the Bears, where left tackle and center. Those might be the biggest question marks. But it seems like for the Vikings, those guys really are the stalwarts of the line. So yeah, I think to your point earlier, guard is probably where they'd like to upgrade.
That's where I'm a little worried. It was brutal last year,
The one thing with the Vikings, part of that trade up to get that second first rounder. I mean, we talk about the Bears. It's funny how there's so many similarities. The big gap for them between 9th overall and 75th overall. It's probably even more extreme for the Vikings. They go 11th, 23rd. And they don't have a second or third rounder. Their next pick is 108th overall in the 4th round. So there's also, is that the range of second, third round where they would want to address offensive line and might not be able to. So they might want to address it, but they might have to draft guys on day 3 that aren't starting right away, and it's longer term upgrades. So
to be honest, and this is just old school football in my head, I'm not too worried with a guard because you can always take a tackle, a has-been tackle, a beat up guy, a free agent. You can move a tackle into guard and you can get by if you have to. You can't do the same from a guard to a tackle. There's skill. You need the long arms, sort of thing. So they're going to pick a guard up at some point. To me, it just looked like an obvious nosebleed.
Yeah, for sure. It's, again, Canadian, so I'll go with the hockey reference. Like, you can never have too many centermen because if you have too many centermen, you've got likely a 2-way forward who's playing on the wing and can help out the rest of the line, the line anyway. So, yeah, it seems like, it's the opposite with in the NHL because you want the outside guys, those tackles, really, and I mean, edge rushers to a certain extent too, but specifically on the offensive line, those tackles more than your interior guys. They're just so much more valued there. The one-on-one spots, you can't always give them help, maybe with a tight end or a running back. But.
So for linebacker, they don't run they're in a lot of one linebacker sets, possibly two. And I'll explain why that is when we talk the back half of the tiles. But the 2 names you need to know here for the linebacker core, you got a guy named Blake Cashman who comes over from the Titans like Grenard. So if that was a theoretical trade, he came over. Blake Cashman, people used to frown on him. When he was with the Jets, he got hurt a lot, but I got by getting points out of him. Last year, he finally broke out. He put it together with 106 tackles. Cashman's always been profiled like that, and I'm glad he got a last season emergence. Everybody's tracking Ivan Pace Jr. now. He was an impressive find. He was an undrafted rookie. He was spotted in a preseason wearing the green dot. That's why we chased that green dot so much, Kyle. But anyway, he was picked up. He picked the playbook up fast. Now that Jordan Hicks was injured at the time, but now he actually moved on to the Browns. It's going to be these 2 guys logging significant counts. You got some nice depth pieces here. You got a guy named Jihad Ward coming over. He showed flashes with the Giants as a pass rusher. Brian Osawa was supposed to be the guy, but he got overshadowed really quick. And then there's another guy who was a rookie last year, Andre Carter II. He was part of that rookie class last season We've watched his stocks dwindle out a little bit, but he kind of fell apart at the combine last year. We still don't know what he's going to be. But overall, if you're only playing 2 linebacker role in this setup, possibly 1 full-time, it's not a bad position. I think they can get more than by with that.
Yeah, and I mean, from an IDP perspective, there's only 1 linebacker on the field. That gives that linebacker like the whole field to get opportunities to get tackles, as opposed to dividing it in half, and both could still probably produce. But really may want to chase how many teams really play with those 1 linebackers, and if there's a correlation of that being a really good fantasy option.
The bread and butter of this team is their defensive backs, which I'll cut into in a second. Just wanted to throw it back to you. Anything else you see here? I know they got a good wide receiver core, don't they?
Well, they've got 2 amazing wide receivers, and after that, it doesn't look so great.
Yeah.
But, I don't think you want to draft anyone else. I mean, they brought in Trent Sherfield as their big free agent acquisition to be their, I suppose, 3rd wide receiver, unless Brandon Powell, who had to play a lot more last year because of injuries to Justin Jefferson.
I got by with Powell, and PFF got him as a slot right now. I got by in some deeper formats with that guy, so maybe he has some
deeper, really intense training camp battle with both of them being thrown passes by Sam Darnold. Everyone
yeah, no kidding, right?
Yeah. Jefferson's fantastic. I feel like Jordan Addison's just been underrated in Dynasty because his supposed ceiling is capped with Jefferson. His weekly ceiling isn't necessarily capped, but his just overall, he's not going to be. I would argue maybe it's his floor that's capped because Jefferson's always going to get targets. If a team decides to scheme out Addison in a certain way or just really force things to the run game, Jefferson will still get his, but that's the guy that maybe loses some targets. But ultimately, I think they're both really good to get. I still think Addison, though, even last year when he was producing, it still felt like he was a value in Dynasty bank based on where he was being ranked. And now
we all can agree Justin Jefferson's going to get his regardless, so we can just move on from him.
and I think because of that, again, Addison might be a really good buy. Back to the point I made with Hawkinson, if you want to buy in Dynasty, but right now, before they draft a rookie quarterback, I think he's been hurt in value because, Sam Darnold's his quarterback. I think Jefferson's going to be good enough and fine, but Addison will really suffer, seems to be the conventional thought. So Addison might be a really good Dynasty buy right now.
So here's a Dynasty buy on the defensive backs. This is a fun room, and it's an excellent role, and it's so neat. I posted this for trivia, okay? At all the defensive backs back there that you can see on the PFF screen. For the audience at home that's just tuning in and you're on Spotify, I just pulled PFF depth chart up. Me and Kyle are kind of hashing this out. There's a player that I chased late in drafts because most people don't know who this is. The defensive back that finished 2nd in tackles on this team with 116, 4 forced fumbles, which tied him for 1st on this team, 7 tackles for a loss, which tied him for 2nd. Don't let this crowded backfield fool you. It's a name that you're not going to think. I know when I think of defensive backs, I'll tell you who it's not. It's not Harrison Smith. It's not Cameron Bynum.
Oh, okay. That's actually who I thought it was.
No, it's not. It's a guy named Josh Metellus. Everybody stays away from this guy. Yeah. Here's the point. If anybody listens to anything I say this podcast, let me write this home. People are scared of him because they think he's a nickel. He's not. He's a secret LB3. Flores puts him on the field, and he makes him a weapon all around the field. You'll see this guy in the slot. You'll see this guy coming off. You'll see this guy in a blitz. Josh Metellus is a secret weapon. If you can sneak down where his ADP is and get him, late in drafts at DB4 value, and you play him as a DB2 or 3, again, 2nd in tackles with 116, 4 forced fumbles, tied for 1st, 7 tackles for a loss. That's a steal right there, and most people don't notice Josh Metellus.
You know what? I'm thinking back. I think the Packers lost one of the games to the Vikings. I think he got like an interception or 2. Like that, he had a. It's like, this guy again. Why is he emerging all of a sudden? So that's a good point.
Exploit it, Kyle. A lot of people don't know who this is. He's not going away. You look at Flores. Flores loves this guy. He's going to put him anywhere to be successful. He even made a joke in a press conference. What position you play? Nickel, linebacker? He goes, I'll play wherever they need me to. You can get him.
Can I play quarterback when Cousins hurt?
Yeah, that's a good one. But then the other guy, the guy that everybody knows is Cam Bynum. He's a sure tackler, 137 stops. He possessed the same abilities to cover and tackle. He's your top tier player there. Obviously, everybody's kind of high on him now because they see what he can do. PFF loves him. hey, they catch the ball on him. I think that was pretty high in the league, and he makes the tackle. So you got Bynum on one side. You got Metellus running around anywhere he can. You got this old guy who's 35 now. His name's Harrison Smith. We all know who that is. The thing about Harrison Smith, if you pull his data up, he's not the same player he was 5 years ago, okay? He's more so playing as like the hero, as the aging veteran. I've seen him play corner a couple times this year. His stats aren't the same. I thought he was going to retire last year. He came back. I thought he was going to retire this year. He came back. He just keeps producing in different roles. So his new role now, he got 3 forced fumbles. And they're finding creative ways to put him on the field so they can let the other 2 young guns have at it, So those are your 3 guys. Your depth pieces, Lewis Sign's kind of been the joke. A lot of people drafted him high years ago when the Vikings old leadership traded up. I think he was like the 12th overall pick. I can't remember his deal. But the dream is dead. There's too many people in front of him. He's got leg injuries, otherwise a promising career. He's a depth piece at this point. The other corner over there we were talking about was Byron Murphy at the beginning of the podcast, right? He's a shadow corner. Problem is he gave up 6 touchdowns compared to his 3 interceptions last year. I'm not a fan. What's his name? AKYLEB, Caleb Evans and Miki Blackman. They get rotated in and out again. Again, this cornerback crew, they can get a little bit of an upgrade if you want. I say that it should be a team need just because, A, the draft is so strong in it this year, and 2, they're ranked 24th against the pass. So if you want to exploit that, maybe bring in a quarterback this year. But I think if the defense holds up and they figure out the cornerback room, I think this team can do a quick rebuild. What says you?
Yeah, no, I think everything you said made sense there, and where they should prioritize on this defensive backfield, especially again if you want to use Metellus so much, you might need another corner to help with the coverage. If you're using him in so many versatile ways, you can't necessarily rely on him just penciled in, like you said. He's not just going to be the nickel corner. Do they get maybe a pure nickel corner in the draft, and that way that frees up Metellus to do a lot of other different things?
Yeah.
We'll see.
I was shocked by Metellus, but yeah, that's part of the scheme. They bring him down. That's why they don't play as many linebackers. And if those edges can hold it together, that it's going to be a Metellus season. So,
running back, I guess, is the last position group. I think Aaron Jones could have a really good season, especially at the start. If Hawkinson's not there, I think he could easily carve out a role where he's number 3 on the team in targets. So early season, Aaron Jones, I think, will be great. Maybe once Hawkinson returns, that's where he might be limited to just scoring a bunch of touchdowns if he can. Like that's a good goal line back too, and I think that's where he gets all the valuable touches. He gets goal line carries. He gets receiving work. He's there on 3rd down. So yeah, I think Jones, even not a true full workhorse, because I do think Ty Chandler is going to factor in enough, and they could still draft a running back. Truth is,
I've been waiting to see McBride do something. I've been holding my breath. I've been. He's been on the practice squad.
And I think my point was going to be that exactly. They tried to a lot of people were high on McBride last year, thinking he might take over Ty Chandler's job. I think Ty Chandler's been pretty underrated. I was on Team Ty Chandler last year as the backup running back. I wanted no part of McBride, to be honest. I did not like his tape as a college prospect. So I wasn't really that surprised to see him fall to the 7th round, to be honest. It feels like they're just going to draft over top of him. And I don't know. I think whatever rookie, assuming they draft a rookie running back, I think they're instantly the 3rd guy.
You know what's funny about this team? They were right in the thick of it last year, and then they just decided to blow it up. Let me get rid of Hunter.
The Cousins injury really set them apart.
Yeah,
so I think that happened like right around the trade deadline. I think so. Like they kind of maybe almost over panicked. Okay, yeah, we're our season's done almost. But again, I think Ty Chandler. I think you'll be hard pressed for a rookie to come in and just take the backup job away from him. And we've seen with Aaron Jones, you don't want him playing 100% of the snaps. So I think Chandler is still going to get some work early. He might still be I
think it's fair to assume the 2 teams are rebuilding, and it's either the Lions or Packers going after it this year. I mean, that's my opinion, but it looks strongly that way. That's what I feel like.
Sure. No, I would say, yeah, I think most people will pick up either one of those 2 teams to win the division.
And
which team I'm picking.
No bias.
It took them 21 years to win another division title. You think they're really going to get 2 in a row? I guess.
Well, they've been pacing themselves. Look at these stats though. The Lions put up, man. Total offense, they were 3rd. I had to blink and look at that. I'm like, they were third for real. Goff is a better quarterback than we let on, but total offense 394.8. Remember when the Rams were trying to give all those picks away to take Goff? Well, that kind of backfired, right? Third in offense, fifth in rushing, 135.9. Passing, they were second, 258.9. Now the defense isn't that great, but it's better than previous years. Total defense was 19th, 336.1, so middle of the pack. Rushing defense, they were second. That's impressive because if you remember historically, they used to leak the run, but they gave up only 88.8 as an average. They were number 2 in the league in rushing. Passing defense, and you know this is their kryptonite, especially at corner, right? 27th, 247.4. So it's this team's kind of telling. They excel at certain positions and they just bleed on the other ones. Any thoughts there? You see any team needs, weaknesses? What are your thoughts with the Lions?
I'm sure everyone would say corner, but they have already addressed it. They've brought in 2 free agents at corner. So I think internally they knew they had to address it. But if it is such a weakness, they can also still continue to address it in the draft. So I wouldn't be opposed to it corner being one of those spots. Again,
go ahead.
I would say edge rusher too, opposite Aiden Hutchinson. I also think again they've made moves to address that too. So you don't have.
I'm not convinced with the edge rusher either. I put that as my number one because Marcus Davenport. I haven't seen him the answer in doing anything in a long time. You know, a late round DL makes sense. You know, draft night I can see it. But Hutchinson needs help. He had 67 more pressures than any other player in the team. That was my number one need. Is that your number one need?
Yeah. I think between that and corner, I guess they would be number one need because there aren't really any glaring holes. So even though they have addressed both the edge rusher and corner, it still feels like they can still do more at that position and still have bigger impact than if they heavily address really any other position.
Edge
rusher line is super solid, so there's really no weak spot on that offensive line, to be honest.
I put guard though because what's his name, Glasgow and Zeider, they were starters, but I feel like they can easily upgrade. They can easily beef that up. I mean, it wasn't a bad spot, but I'm just looking at it as far as growing.
I mean, you've got like 2 all-pro level tackles. I don't know if either of them actually has won an all-pro, but they play at that level. And you have, I believe Ragno's been at least a second-team all-pro center at times. So, if you're going to upgrade any position on the O-line, it would be guard. But like, if I look at those PFF grades, that's green across the board. Like this is
true.
Yeah,
that was being picky because I couldn't find a hole either.
The other line would be a bigger priority. I agree.
And I'm in agreement with you. I think the players we're going to talk about, I think corner was identified and they've kind of patched it up a bit. Mm-hmm. What says you about this offense? What do you like in here? What are you seeing?
A lot of players, right? Like, I mean, the entire backfield is fantasy relevant in the sense Goff's good, and then both running backs, David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, the way they split the roles last year, the way they both accounted for a ton of touchdowns, and they won doing that. There's no reason to think the Lions will go away from that. So both Montgomery
I was thinking that too. With quarterback, I was thinking in the backfield there. I was like, remember the last couple of years, everyone keeps talking about they're going to move on from Goff. I think he's safe now. I think he's cemented himself here. What do you think?
And especially taking Hendon Hooker last year in the draft probably buys some time. Like that's a guy they do want to develop long term, so they don't feel the need to have to rush into it. I mean, they've got probably one of the more normal draft picks when we talk about like complementary of what they have. I mean, of the NFC North, they've got their first, their second, their third. They don't have their fourth. They've got their fifth. They've got an extra 6 and their own 7th. Like their draft is like mostly intact of what it like would be considered normal draft. They have 7 picks. It's just essentially they've moved from the 4th round to the 6th round with one of those picks. So they can kind of.
I really feel like an edge and a corner is where they're going to go. That's what I really feel in my gut.
With all, again, how many offensive players are going to go in the top half of the draft, sitting at 29 at the end of the first? Your best bets probably are on defense. And if those 2 important positions, edge rusher and corner, there's guys available. Yeah, it wouldn't shock me if 29 overall is one of those 2 positions.
True. On defensive line, if I may, there's 2 players that really stand out to me. Aiden Hutchinson, he was second in the NFL in pressures with 101. I mean, he ended up with 11.5 sacks. He probably would have had a heck of a lot more if he had somebody on the other side, if teams didn't have to shift and double team him. There's a guy inside the interior defensive tackle. You can get him late in drafts. McNeil, if I'm saying that right, McNeil. He led the team he was the second best pass rusher. He led the interior. They actually brought a guy in to sit next to him. His name's DJ Reader. For my audience that's not familiar with DJ Reader, he's historically a really good middle of the field rush defender, and he's historically really good at rushing the passer. So what does that mean? Some years he has high sacks, some years he doesn't have any. I think last year he only had one, but still he's a run stuffer. That's what they need. He's a clogger up so we can get Aiden Hutchinson off the ball. The other spot is where I'm a little bit mindful. They brought in Marcus Davenport, kind of on a prove-it year. Josh Kaminsky's there as depth. So is Josh Paschal. If I was to – that's going to be a coaching battle. That's going to be a position battle in preseason. If I was to look at that, maybe this is my hot take, I'm not a fan of Davenport at all. I would give it to either Kaminsky or Paschal as maybe winning that position if they don't bring anybody else in. Any thoughts on that?
I actually have another name to add for you. I don't know if you know who this is, but he led the league in sacks last year. The CFL, of course, but Matthew Betts, coming from the BC Lions, the Edmonton Elks the year before that, just a couple of really dominant seasons in the CFL, and he went and he signed a contract with the Lions. Nothing's guaranteed there, but because that need on edge rusher exists, he's got a real chance, if he impresses in training camp, to put himself in that battle spot. And considering how good he was last year, so dominant. Yes, it's the CFL, not the NFL, but I was impressed enough. Certainly the Lions seemed impressed enough to go and sign him. Again, mentioning the position of need, it seems like no stone is going to be unturned for them. They'll take every opportunity. This dude's led a professional league in sacks last year. He tied or broke the record for sacks by a Canadian in the CFL, because he is a national guy. As much as I just
home, the Lions on Spotify, spans on YouTube here. We got a Canadian in the house, and he's tracking all leagues, and he just gave you the sleeper of the year right here. That's interesting.
If Matthew Betts can fill out a role in this, even if it's not a starter, as a rotational pass rush, I mean, you could just pick him up off waivers in basically any league, whether it's dynasty or redraft, probably. So just to see. I mean, I don't think he has very much or any guarantees in his contract, so they could just as easily decide to release him at the end of training camp, maybe go to a practice squad, or he signs up with someone else. But I think he does, as you've mentioned, with Davenport being the starter in kind of name only, but it seems like it's going to be a real full competition for that second defensive end spot. So
I was thinking,
as long as Betts gets a legit shot, I think he has a chance to impress enough to make.
I was thinking this team can use a little bit more depth to defensive line. So not just another edge starter, but some depth would help. But that pretty much closes it out on defensive line. Going back to you on offense, what do you see? What do you like?
So we've got two incredible pass catchers. I guess we can hit both positions right here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta. Both. I think you could argue both could finish at number one at both positions, wide receiver and tight end. So imagine you're still probably taking Amon-Ra St. Brown early, but I think he cemented himself, especially in one QB leagues, but maybe even in super flex leagues, as a first-round redraft pick. I don't think that's out of the question. Certainly dynasty startups, he's probably going, if he's not a first rounder, he's certainly an early second rounder. So if you want Amon-Ra, you're going to probably have to spend your first on him.
Sadly, one of those 32-team leagues I was telling you about, I took over a team. The guy rage quit. So he drafted Justin Jefferson in the first round. And I ended up taking a mod in the 32, so like the 64th pick. Because, his rookie year, this time of year, people were concerned with his drops. But anyway, I got those two guys, and I'm rocking a 32-team league with them. Can you imagine that? And knowing the IDP that I know. So It's just so fun. It's just so fun. Rock. I love drafting. I love playing this time of year because this is where you can catch the values before trade calculators, before all the hot takes ruin it,
For sure. But yeah, I think that pretty much sums it up on offense. We even talked a little bit about the offensive line. So I guess, finish this out on the Lions defense.
I like this linebacker core. I know a lot of people aren't sure, but let's start it with Alex Anzalone. He used to get bagged a lot, Thor Jr. here, but he turned out to be a pretty good linebacker. I usually rank him somewhere in the top 30-ish, despite being always criticized. He actually improved last season. Okay, and that's good news because we got a second-year player coming up, Jack Campbell. He struggled at time to time. People were saying he was overdrafted, what have you. again, I did an article, Kyle, Age Cliffs, and I think I did a video with Dynasty. Linebackers peak as they get older. Give this guy a little bit of time. We got an Alex Anzalone here. We got a Jack Campbell. Derek Barnes showed flashes. He looked the part in training camp, and he returns in the same role. And if you want to count, the depth, Malcolm Rodrigo, as they call him, he's playing what he can. He even played fullback a little bit. Then they got a guy, Jalen Reeves. He served, pretty darn well on special teams, and he rotated in. Linebacker, again, has always been the kryptonite of the Lions. Teams would just run it down their throat. I think Chris Spielman was the last really quality guy there, and I think they figured it out.
He's been retired for 20 years.
I know. That just shows you how bad the Lions have been. But they were the number 2 unit against the run. So those are my guys there. You see anything else? What says you?
No, it seems like that is a deep enough position where they don't, especially how early they drafted last year. Maybe that says the team prioritizes that they'll continue to draft it, but it also could be we made our big investments last year. We found the guy that we think could be our linebacker for a while, that we're not really going to touch it much in the draft. Maybe, again, those couple of 6th rounders or the 7th rounder, that's the spot they address that with maybe more pressing needs elsewhere.
I'm in agreement with you when we get to the secondary. I think they got the right players involved, especially with the trades, what have you. Wanted to give it back to you again on offense. Is there anything on offense you want to cover? You think we hit it?
I think we covered everything. I mean,
I think so too.
Between Amon-Ra, Laporta, Montgomery, Gibbs, and then Superflex Goff, you're going to have a lot of guys go early, and they're all going to get so much production that it really doesn't leave much for anyone else. So there's a tons of those 5 that go early, and then no one else. So
this defensive backfield, especially the corners, is going to make or break them. The outside corners, especially, we figured out that was a weakness last year. So I think they fixed it. They got 2 guys there. They got a guy named Carlton Davis, who they traded for the Bucks. He has the pedigree, and I think he got hurt a couple times last year, but he's known as a tackler corner at that position. He's known as a hitter. Carlton Davison can cover a top wideout as well. There's another guy lesser known they brought in. His name is Amik Robertson. He's a smaller corner, but he plays with high intensity. He's a physical player. He can lay the wood on, so to speak. He's only 5'9". But both of those players there, Davis and Robertson, they're actually improvements at the position. Then over at safety is probably the best part of this whole group. Nickelback Brian Branch. He's been playing since day one. He plays all the spots. His best role is nickelback or maybe a third safety. And then we have Kirby Joseph, the ball hawk as he is, playing free safety. And this name I might need a little help with. Ifito Malanfu. I don't even know if I'm saying it right. But that guy broke out last season. His 62 tackles really only came from those 6 games, if you really think about it. If you pull his stats up, those 62 tackles came out of 6 games. And now he's getting a significant snap count. And I think right now PFF has him listed as a starter. So that's going to be kind of interesting. I picked him up in a lot of different places. So that's kind of the way PFF has it is the way I see it. I got Branch, Joseph. They still got Mosley Davis, but I think Branch is going to come down in the safety role. There, let me pull it up. I think Branch is going to come down in the nickel role. And let's look at it. Let's take a look at this real quick you got Branch, Joseph, you got Davis, you still got Mosley. Mosley was a bit of a weakness, even though his grade was good. And then you also got how do you say that name? Iofoli, whatever it is.
Melifanu. I think it's Ifatu Melifanu. I think it's how it is.
That's it.
I could have butchered it just as easily as he did. So
And don't be afraid of Joseph. Like I said, he's more of a ball hawk. He's going to get you turnovers back there, especially if he's allowed to play free while the rest of them are doing all this. Kind of looks like a cover 3 scheme to me. But like I said, the Lions, they don't pigeonhole themselves. Aaron Glenn used to be an excellent corner with the Jets, and he's an even better head coach. Yeah, when I run it to nickel, that's what I wanted to show you. When I run it to nickel, he's in there when I run it to nickel. And then you bring down the other guys. So I'm just not sold on Sutton or Mosley. So I think they're going to move on from him. I could be wrong. But other than that, and the exception of Davenport, I think it's a good roster. You see a lot of green on one side and 1 or 2 suspect yellows over here. What says you?
Well, I think you summed up the secondary pretty well. And I guess the last thing I'll talk about a defensive back is one that's available in the draft. And really, all four of the teams we talked about today could get him because I think he'll go late enough. He actually didn't play college football. He went out of high school and a couple years later played in I think it was the fan controlled football league, the semi professional league. And he used that, I think, and had a pretty decent 2022 in that league, springboard that to a CFL contract last year with the Toronto Argonauts. And as a rookie in his first true professional season, he was an Eastern All-Star for that very strong Toronto secondary that went 16-2 in the regular season. So, because he didn't play in the NCAA, and because he's never had an NFL contract, he's actually draft eligible with the way it is. So he has declared for the draft. He still is technically under contract with the Argos. They have kind of already said it that they'll release him if he's drafted, so that'll allow him to go play in the NFL. I know a lot of CFL teams will do that. They know that a lot of these players, their dreams, even the Canadian players, is to play in the NFL, and none of them want to be viewed as the team that's going to force you to stay. So they'll usually just okay, you really want to chase an NFL dream, we'll release you with the hope that because we did that, if you do come back, you'll give us kind of the first call and attracts other free agents as well. So you really don't see teams saying no to that and not releasing players to go play in the NFL because you don't want to be known as the GM that doesn't do that because you're especially the American free agents probably that do want to just play it for a couple of years and go back down south. They're not going to want to sign with you. So that's Quantez Stiggers could be an interesting guy that could be late in drafts that, again, isn't coming from the NCAA. So probably unknown to a lot of people. But from all the reports in terms of, I believe the Lions actually had a visit with him, or he had a pro day, and the Lions kind of mentioned, like, we might got an all-star defensive end from the CFL, now an all-star corner from the CFL in the same kind of class really cheaply in this case. So Quantez Stiggers, a name to look for in the NFL draft.
Man, that Canadian old school, your IDP skills are excellent, my friend. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you for coming on the show. Those are two names I'm going to keep an eye on. Two more talking points for you. I just want to tell the audience and people on Spotify. This is the site that I wrote this team preview for. It's IDP Plus. They're running a bunch of promos now. They're doing giveaways. So if you guys want to just look at the IDP exclusive, and there's a lot more I put in it, a lot more team scheme stuff like that. But I wanted to use this podcast as an opportunity to talk about offense and defense. But go over there and jump on IDP Plus, check it out. There's a Discord. I'm in there sometimes, and the rankings, of course. You guys can see me. You guys can see me over there and the fantasy six pack. Another thing I wanted to point out is you guys seen Kyle Center. He puts a lot of work into his content. Check him out. He's on not Instagram. He's on Twitter as much as I am, or they call it X these days, right? You're on there giving your best takes. Check him out over there. It's at Senra Says, right? You're also on Going for Two. Where else can the audience find you?
Yeah, so Going for Two Live, the first thing I'll talk about that is the Going for Two Live network has shows almost every night of the week. And one of the shows I host is called Press Coverage. And next Monday, which is the 15th, I don't remember the date. But yeah, Monday on the 15th, Andrew Erickson from Fantasy Pros is coming on as my guest. So that'll be super exciting. I met him at one of the Fantasy Football Expos. Great guy to talk to. And I'm excited to continue the conversation on a meeting where everyone can watch and chime in on the again, press coverage on the Going for Two Live network. With Full Press Coverage, I do a lot of things. I primarily co-host two podcasts, the Full Press Fantasy Pod and the Full Press Packers Pod. Also, that's where you'll find a lot of my written content is fullpresscoverage.com. I've got a pretty detailed 3-part series on my running back rankings pre-draft. With my film grade evaluations, I had production, and then the athletic testing. I'll say this right now. This is my kind of hot take I like to end with. Blake Watson is actually my RB1 in this rookie class right now out of Memphis. And he's someone where if I look at the Fantasy Pros rankings, it's pretty wild. He's like RB27 in one QB overall. He's like the 96th player. And I don't understand why people are fading him. He averaged over 1,400 scrimmage yards per season. I love the tape. Well, I don't love the tape from anyone in this class, but He was one of the better ones in this class. Like my highest tape grade this year would have been RB 11 last year. So it's not there's not the top end there. But because of that, a guy like Watson, I think, really could be the best in this class.
It's fun to do your research this early out rather, because like when you're right, you feel good about it. When you catch the Pukas and the people like that. For the audience on Spotify, the guys that can't see my screen, I just pretty much did it for the YouTube audience. I pulled up Kyle's Twitter account. You can find him over at Senra Says, and then plus he's on all these podcasts and he's writing articles. Thank you so much for coming on the show. Thank you so much. And
this was
would you
come
kind of
a marathon of an episode, 2 hours, but it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. This flew by.
But we covered 4 teams. We covered it. We hammered it home, and then hopefully they can use this. Maybe some of our pre-draft stuff, works out.
Let's hope.
So, all right, we're gonna head out. Thank you so much. Thanks for coming in, and we'll see you on the next one. Take care.